So tonight we have a very special panel. We've invited 4 extraordinary men to sit on a panel with me. I'm the director here in OneTaste Los Angeles, Eli Block. And we're going to have a really interesting conversation about what makes men tick in this world. Personal experience, theory, philosophy, you guys are going to hear it all tonight. So please join me and welcome our panelists. So welcome, guys.
Thank you. We're set.
That was like Fallout.
Yeah. I just followed the lead.
Awesome. So before we get started with like the questions and everything, and there will be time for audience questions as well, I want to just first say to all of you guys, thank you so much for joining us here. And if you would go ahead and just say briefly, like, who are you? What world do you come from? And what inspired you to appear tonight in this forum to be here with us tonight? So we'll start here.
Let's get started. My name is Carter. I have a pretty diverse background. I used to be in the military. I now am in sort of internet e-commerce here in Silicon Beach. I also am big in the physical fitness world. I met Eli at our gym, and I have never done anything with OneTaste, but I have done some other speaking at the OneTaste organization. I've been exposed to the men that are involved. I've found that experience really fulfilling. Thought it was really interesting to hear what they had to say, and I thought that I had something to contribute to what they were going through, and thought this could be another opportunity to just extend that.
Thank you.
Hey, thanks guys so much for coming out. My name's Sage. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Addictive Wellness. We make a line of delicious, sugar-free, herbal-infused raw chocolates and a couple of other products like that. You may have seen in health food stores around the area. And I come kind of from that world of health and nutrition and traditional herbal systems of indigenous cultures. And I'm obviously a guy, and men's issues are very important to me, and something I do put quite a bit of thinking into, and also approach men's issues from a hormonal perspective and how we can work on it from that side as well. So it's all really interesting and fascinating stuff to me. I'm excited to share kind of my perspective.
Thanks for being here. And actually, funny story, Sage. I was at Erewhon, which is a grocery store, really awesome grocery store in Los Angeles, and I walked past a sign that was his company's slogan. I literally took a picture of it and sent it to like 10 friends of mine because I liked it so much. And then tonight we were talking, and he's just like, he's a fountain of information. So I'm excited to finally connect those dots.
Thank you.
My name is Alex McAfee. I currently run an agency that I started called Fast and Light, and we do digital marketing, business development for conscious businesses, yoga studios, meditation people, things like that. Before that, I started a men's line called Conrad Men, and we make meditation cushions, bags, things like that. And my first startup was Seek Retreat, where you can book yoga retreats online. In another life, I was a climbing bum. I lived in my car, traveled around the world, lived in Jackson, Chamonix, Aspen, Telluride, Mount Hood, Salt Lake, just all over. But had a great life, lived in my car, lived for about $600 a year, or I'm sorry, $600 a month, and just had a great time. And then I came tonight, like I'm really interested in like masculinity and men's study and personal growth, and I think that's kind of an underserved thing right now in the world. Like there's plenty of women's studies programs. Like when's the last time you heard of like a men's study major at college? I think there's one right now. So very interested in all of this, yeah.
Awesome, thanks for being here. Actually, I loved your bio. If you go to the website, can you say the website for your clothing line?
Conrad Men's, MENS.com.
I loved I read the bio.
Oh, thanks.
And I every time I go shopping for clothing, it's like, I remember when I was younger, actually, especially, I would go shopping for clothing, and I would think to myself, I want to buy one thing that I can wear literally everywhere. I don't want to, hey, Carter, check it out my desk. It's not how it is anymore. But there was a way that, like reading your bio, it was sort of like you actually did find freedom in all these different conditions. And that was hugely impressive to me, and to be coupled with like an actual line of goods, especially including a meditation cushion, I thought was rather unique, and I'd never seen that before. You know, you go into these clothing stores and they sell all kinds of things, you know, but like never have I gone and seen like an Abercrombie Zafu.
That's what I need for it. Like,
Yeah.
nobody's doing it, and I was like, I just want to make stuff I like.
Yeah, that was, to me, that was super brilliant. So I had a little chuckle reading that tonight. It was really cool.
Thanks, dude.
And then I guess I'll go last. I'm sort of like your moderator, getting everyone's stuff tonight. I'm Eli. The way I found myself here was I had a really good childhood, no huge traumas or anything like that, and still there was something kind of missing from my life. And I got to be in my mid-20s and was really interested in women and getting, you know, very intimate with women. And there was a whole host of experiences that, you know, was sort of a gateway to my manhood is what I saw. And I had a really hard time with it because I was so anxious. I had like debilitating anxiety. And I didn't try to find this particular, you know, we're at OneTaste, which is a company teaching about genital stroking, right, for consciousness, right? Non-heedless based genital stroking. And stumbled across a friend who was learning it, and I didn't know what he was learning, but I saw the results in him as he was learning it. Which once I found out what it was he was doing, I had a very hard time dismissing as, you know, BS basically, because it was like I didn't know what it was, but it was having an effect on me through him. And we were both working at Apple at the time. He was my boss there, and there was just something about the way that he was growing that kind of was messing with me a little bit. I'd never seen anything quite like it before. So several years later, after a series of some very difficult relationship experiences, I got back in touch with him, and he basically told me, hey, there's this men's protocol, there's this men's program, which is eventually part of what Brian Mulvaney, who was the chief strategist at CrossFit, who introduced me to Carter, right, as part of what he caught on to, right, about us. He basically saw our founder at an event and was like, in his very like CrossFit sort of majesty kind of way, if you know this dude, he's just like, he's awesome, but he's like, wow, these people have a protocol and it works just like mine, you know? It's sort of like I have to know everything about this, you know, like, and he was amazing and ended up coming on staff with us for like a year and a half and being our strategist for a long time. And you know, basically, I saw the results of this protocol and was like, I just don't know what he's doing. And he told me, and I said, absolutely not. I will never in a million years ever do that. Like, thank you very much. That's good for you, but I'm going back to the bat cave. You know, like, no thank you. And after about, again, 2 years of getting my butt kicked in relationships, because I like powerful women, that's the other thing. I like women with a lot of electricity. It's like, you know, I think A$AP Rocky has a song about that, you know, but I just like, I like bad bitches. I can't help it. And I didn't have any idea how to handle them. And I knew, I was like, okay, I want 220, but I don't know how, I'm a 110. You know, so I had to go and get the training, which is what happened. And then 9 years later, I'm sitting here, and I feel like a very different person. So I'm really excited to be on the stage with these guys tonight, to be in our house. It's, again, a pleasure to have you guys. Let's get cooking. All right. So our first question, Sage. This one was kind of inspired by what I read about you.
Thank you.
And
I
also,
have a good answer for this one now.
Oh yeah, we'll see. And also, you know, I think Carter, you represent a part of life with your current emphasis on like really high quality fitness. And here's the thing, Carter runs CrossFit Santa Monica, which is I had heard a lot about CrossFit gyms before I ever set foot in one, and theirs was the first one I ever set foot in. And literally every stereotype about CrossFit gyms these guys break. I felt so cared for, and like I could actually settle into a workout without worrying about hurting myself in some way. It was actually the best gym experience I've ever had. So I think this question is kind of for both of you guys. But it brought a certain kind of balance to me. one of our words tonight is balance. And so for all of you, obviously, but what do you guys see are the greatest places that men are imbalanced? You know, it's 2018. We have a pretty wild world that we live in. Like, when you guys look out, when you read the paper, when you hear, you know, when your friends come to you for advice, when all those things happen, like, from your vantage point, this is, you know, for anybody, like, where do you guys see the greatest imbalances, and what's up with that?
You want me to start?
You gotta go first.
Okay,
for you.
Yeah, so this, you know, there's, as you said, there's a lot of things going wrong. The one that I can jump into and address, I feel the most completely and from a holistic perspective, is male hormones. Is something that's totally messed up these days. A lot of guys have gotten into a place where they're estrogen dominant. You have more estrogens in your system essentially than testosterone, and it's totally throwing you out of balance. And some of the things
Is mint tea a contributor to that?
No, you're fine. You're doing good over there.
Tea tree. Tea tree.
Yeah, tea tree, that will cause your problems.
Okay.
If you're doing like oral tea tree, it's
Okay, shit.
bad news. But it's not the worst. But it's like it's estrogens are everywhere, and testosterones are hard to come by in our environment and our food, basically. You know, the most glaring and obvious one is so many guys put on cologne because they want to smell good and come off as sexy to women, right? You put on cologne because you want to be sexy, but that cologne is packed full of things like phthalates and parabens that look a lot like estrogens and are able to sit in your hormone receptors and block. It's like a game of musical chairs. They're blocking the testosterone molecules from being able to fit into that slot. So that's just like the ultimate paradox. Is
Okay,
that
you gotta stop talking now, dude. We're gonna...
Yeah, so that's. But you know, there's food as well. There's things like, you know, soy that's being pumped into everything that we're eating, and hormones in you know, processed meats and things like that. So figuring out how to detoxify all these and avoid them, detoxify them, and then have all the right ingredients going into your body to build healthy hormones. Things like healthy saturated fats, things like coconut oil and ghee, maybe some more animal-based foods for people who are into those kinds of things, pasture-raised eggs.
Me, I'm into animal-based things.
Right on. We're animals. But I'm into animal-based people as well. You know, vitamin D3 is another important one. You want to take it with K2 so your body uses it right. So, and then you get into the whole herbal realm of great herbs for building androgenic hormones and things like that. But yeah, to me, that's one of the most glaring ways that we're being messed up as guys, is by our hormones, which are like the master switches of so many things happening in our bodies, are being thrown totally out of whack.
I love that. Thank you. I mean, I both love and hate that, you know, because, you know, food consumption is, I think, one of those places in our culture where we're the most unconscious, right? We unconsciously consume food, we unconsciously consume sex, we, you know, all these things that, you know, for me, OM was a huge help for. But let me ask you this real quick before we move on to the next panelist. What are like the three things, from your perspective, being an expert in the topic, what are like 3 things to avoid and 3 things to go towards?
Awesome. So, 3 things to avoid.
Asking for first.
First, you're
already doing it, right?
You're already on the program. First things to avoid would be just generally chemical products. Anything that's not a natural product, whether it's cleaning products or body products, or toothpaste, anything like that. Then avoid all other forms of edible estrogen, whether it's hormone-fed meats or soy, which is probably one of the biggest problems. And then the last thing to avoid, you know, I think those are really the 2 biggest ones. I think I would just leave it with those 2. If you could cut out those 2, that's just amazing. And then you could take things like indole-3 carbinol or DIM, dimethyl-methane. Those are 2 great supplements you can take to detoxify bad estrogens. And then you could eat healthy saturated fats and take vitamin D3.
Awesome. What are 2 of the most delicious healthy saturated fats?
Ghee and coconut oil.
Wow. Okay, I'm with it. All right, sweet. Where are we unbalanced, guys?
Balance?
Where are we unbalanced?
Where are we unbalanced?
You look out in the world and you
Yeah.
see shit that is unbalanced. You see this, and what is it?
I think the idea of optimizing to the extreme, of being able to be so good at doing so much and not doing anything well, I think is a really big problem. And we still do live in a culture of busy and achievement. And we were talking before we started, like the idea of, I think the next wave of luxury is actually going to be analog, and having the ability to have time and to chill out, and being able to turn off your phone, not have people expect things from you. And we've kind of gone from the whole idea of work hard, play hard, to where that's expected, and to where you don't have time to think. You don't have time to think and innovate and create, and you get stuck in the hamster wheel of trying to be busy and achieve. And that's where, meditation and mindfulness, I think that's why all these things are emerging so heavily right now, is because the information overwhelm, like our bodies and our nervous systems and everything else around us, like we can't process the information enough. And then, so I think that's a big one. And then also just the balance of some other big things like emotional intelligence, the balance of the tip that's happening right now, like, I'm into Kundalini, or moving frequency in the Aquarian age, and the rise of women. And I heard this thing at this panelist at the Eli Block of Aspen of like 70% of women or people in college are women, which means that they're probably going to be the majority of people in leadership positions. And so what does that look like for the world at large, or at least America, and the workforce and the masculine and feminine polarity, and now women are going to be in charge, and how do we deal with that, and what does that dynamic look like?
How do we deal with that?
Yeah. Anyway.
Yeah, awesome.
My answer will probably be a very similar answer I'll give to most questions tonight, and that is, there's an imbalance between what we think we're supposed to, we do what we think we're supposed to do versus what we actually do want to do. I find that in my own life in the past, and in most people's lives, they may have an answer to a question, but when you ask them how do you know the answer, they don't actually know how, because typically they just have been given the answer. Somewhere along the line, their society, their parents, their TV, whatever. And very rarely, and this is probably most prevalent in relationships, very rarely do we stop and be very deeply introspective and decide, I want to be in a relationship because of this, and not just because I'm supposed to be in a relationship. And I don't think that's necessarily unique to men, but I think in terms of the way society structures the male role, we're probably more victim to it. But this is going to be sort of, again, probably the answer I give to almost everything is how. How do you know the answer to that question? Clearly there's some scientific answers on that, but in terms of like spiritually and mentally and how we engage in our EQ and things like that, like when you come up with an answer to something, how do you know that? And typically the answer to the how question is pretty thin.
Got it. Thank you. That's real. That was awesome. You guys are smart. Okay. Next question. So one of the things that I have personally had to take a very large slice of humble pie over the last I've been doing this for about 9 years, but like really probably more like 7 have I actually cared about this next question or been conscious of it. But one of the things that I haven't seen, and I think sort of continues to be unfolding to me, is like how much impact I actually have. And I underestimate and withdraw in so many ways what impact I have. Usually the kind of harm, see, I'm the kind of person who would start out in life being like, oh God, what do they say? There's this old movie called The Tao of Steve, and Donald. It's a movie with Donald Law, which I really liked. And one of the things he says, he's like this sort of like kind of like bullshit artist, who's trying to sleep with chicks, and he's like the wise monk, because he never does anything, never ruins anything. And it's like that was the philosophy I kind of followed for a while. It's like don't do too much and you won't mess too much stuff up. And what I've recently come to realize that actually I tend to cause the most harm when I'm not in something, when I'm not actually sharing my particular set of gifts. I see a lot, and then where I withdraw tends to be where things start to go haywire. Oh, I'm glad I didn't get involved with that. And then it's this whole cycle where, no, actually, you were the one who was supposed to do something. So I'm curious, like, where do you guys see men most misunderstanding or in some way, like, not seeing their impact either personally or in the world or anywhere?
I mean, I can start. I think there is, again, there's some general societal norm that men are supposed to fix things and be the fixers. I don't think that's oftentimes maybe not, you know, what we actually need to do. I think more importantly, like, you need to understand something first, and then you can decide, like, is this something that needs to be fixed? Am I the right person to fix it? Like, am I fix it with someone else? Like, all those questions again. Like, let's actually dig down a little bit deeper and not just say, "Oh God, I'm a man, I've got to fix something." You know, and look, reactively speaking, right? And you know, look, and this is why the Hippocratic Oath, right? Yeah. Do no harm, because the first part of that, like, I think there is something to be said for, you know, just because we're the male influence in a situation doesn't necessarily mean we have to exert the influence. Right. And I think that is something, again, that I think we're pushed to from a young age, and you don't necessarily have to do it. Now, like you said, like, oftentimes, like, you know, as you sit on the sidelines, in things that you should be involved with, pass you by because of you're afraid or you're too lazy to act or willing to act, or whatever. That's a separate problem. But look, sometimes things don't need to be fixed, or sometimes we're not the right one to fix it.
For sure. I like that answer, because for me that's like, you know, I'm in a situation where I'm learning how to train people, which if you've ever done before is freaking difficult, right? And I'm so used to being like the one who does the thing, you know, like, and I really like how I do it, right? And so I'm like, okay, I'm not the doer here, but there's someone else who's doing it who maybe isn't being successful right now, and then that's where I would withdraw. Where I'm like, like I don't know how to help them or whatever, but like hopefully they figure it out, right? But like actually, it was actually on me to like be in the pit with them and actually like I have to learn a new way. I have to learn a new way than the way I learned when I was like 5 years old. And like if I'm holding the nail, I'm the one pounding it, you know?
Right. My thought would be that we as men often underestimate our ability to influence ourselves and have a positive impact on ourselves and change ourselves, whether it be psychologically or in terms of our health, through diet and lifestyle and things of that nature, and in so many ways. I think that we often can get stuck in this groove, and we just kind of, okay, here's the path I'm on, this is what I do, it's who I am, it's the way I look, it's the way I feel every day, and we just kind of plow one day after another through this thing, and we're just in this rut or in this groove, and it takes some impetus and some force to get you up and out of that, and then you like look at the world from a new perspective and see all your potentials and possibilities. And sometimes it takes one change to happen in your life, like you learn a new skill or you try a new food or take a new kind of a supplement, and it radically affects you. Like for me, I thought there was one way and level of energy I would have in my life. And when I was 18, I got turned on to my first superfoods, which in my case was like this mix of some hemp protein and some like spirulina and chlorella and milk thistle and some other Western herbs. And it was some local guy was making it as a product where I was growing up. And I started taking it and I started feeling like, whoa, this is amazing. If I've been missing out on this all this time, like what else is out there, you know? And that kind of really set me off down the rabbit hole of my passion for health and nutrition and herbalism. And I think a lot of people don't stop to think, you know, like, do I actually feel good? Am I actually happy with this? Like, am I really my ultimate self in my psychological way that I approach life? And realize that we can change anything we want in our own lives.
Thank you. These are great.
What was the original question?
The original question was basically like, how is it that men, you know, you're never not having an impact. If you can't not sit, you might be standing or running, right? But you know, so like, where do you see men most sort of discounting or in some way like not understanding the impact they have, positive, negative, anything?
Yeah, I think it's all been talked about. So the idea of trying to be neutral, and I think the ability to have impact, again, small impact, you're being the change you wish to see in the world by your actions, and also how many people around you affect in little ways. Like I have, I know somebody that teaches yoga and talks about consciousness and compassion, but then will be thrown off by a hostess not giving her the restaurant reservation that she wants 30 minutes earlier, and by having and then freaking out on that person, how much impact you have on that one person who's a hostess at a restaurant, so talk to every person that comes into that restaurant, and how that affects the energy of the entire night, and the staff, and the customers affecting the staff. And so having this ripple effect, as opposed to the opposite, if she was really kind to a hostess, like if I'm really kind to somebody, how does that kindness spread? How does that joy spread? How does that, just looking at somebody and valuing them and showing them how much you value them, even if it's a simple gesture, and acknowledging them and seeing them, like a homeless person, like just seeing them and like saying hello to them changes everything. It changes their dynamic with everybody else that walks by them. So in the little everyday instances of how you make people feel special, I think is something that's really overlooked in such a simple way, where you don't have to start a revolution. You can just say hello to somebody.
Yeah. Wow.
Nice.
That's a quote. It's like a Facebook meme. You don't have to start a revolution. Just say hello to somebody. Austin, let's do that.
Right? I'm just saying, that's my mantra.
I love it.
Those were bad answers, right? So, for me, like, and shit, it runs a gamut of professional work, relationship, right? Like those things have put me in those positions. What I have hoped to have gotten to a point now, or getting better to a point, is that you realize, when you're out of control, when you're knocked off your game, like, realize like that the universe will bring you back to center eventually, and it will bring you back to center in the way that it wants you to be there, which will be the right way. You can do it. You can try to regain control. You can throw that grappling hook out and try to regain control, but chances are, like, you're just going to make it worse in the long term. And so for me, the lesson learned is understand that, like, as a human, you're not always going to be in control. And you need to just be comfortable with that and not force your way back into something, because most stuff that we do in the military, like they say, this, once the round is downrange, once the round leaves the end of the gun, like, there's absolutely nothing you can do about where it's going to hit. Like, it is going to hit where it's going to hit, it's going to miss or it's going to hit, and no matter what thinking you do or how much upset you get or whatever happens, like, it doesn't matter. You've got to move on to the next one. And so, like, same thing in life, right? When we do something, typically it's very difficult to retract. And for me, that's sort of the lesson learned from that feeling of helplessness or being knocked off your balance is to realize that, like, you'll come back, and don't try to force it, because you're just going to make it worse in the process.
Thank you.
Yeah, my feeling on that would be, a quote from Paul Watson, who runs Sea Shepherd. He deals with an extraordinary amount of shit every single day and being wanted on multiple continents for really good stuff that he's done. And he says it's always going to be something, and that's how he gets through the stress of everything he deals with. It's always going to be something, and the sooner you accept that, the less surprised you're going to be every time it all goes to shit. And I've found that myself, and you gentlemen probably have as well in your businesses. Like, it's always going to be something. Something's always going to go wrong. Someone's not going to come through on what they promised that they're going to do for you. It's always going to be something, and I still get knocked off all the time by stuff, and it throws me off balance, and I lose my temper, and I become really frustrated. Sometimes you want to curl up in a ball and cry. Sometimes you just want to go punch somebody. It runs the whole range of the spectrum. But I think once you start really accepting, it's always going to be something, and you think about that every time one of these things happens. Every time you get progressively less knocked off center. Because you're just not so shocked by it. You build up that muscle that holds you on to the center balance point, and it just gets better and better over time.
I like that a lot, because what I hear, because we do, we teach a lot about man-woman dynamics here at OneTaste, and so often one of the patterns that we see is like women kind of trying to be easier games. Like women sort of trying to like be lower maintenance, or like, oh, I don't need that, or like just like trying to make it more palatable for a guy who doesn't understand that there's always something, right? Who then the counterpart of that is like, yeah, I just want a woman who's like no drama. You know, like I just want like a really easy relationship where like nothing ever comes up and like there's no desire and like, you know, I was like, okay, the Talking Heads have a song called, you know, Heaven is a Place Where Nothing Really Happens, you know? And there's this, I love that because it's sort of like, that's what part of what we teach is like, it's like, if there isn't something, chances are you're not being told the truth. And either something that's not even like a problem, but a desire. My God, a desire. If there isn't a desire, like oh no, like it's not the guys, like we have a men's course that we do, and it's like it's not the guys who come in who are like, man, I cannot handle this woman. Like I'm having a really hard time. It's not those guys we worry about. Those guys are going to be just fine. It's the guys that come in who are just like everything is so easy. We're just kind of like, oh really? That's good, you know. So thank you for speaking to that. Yeah.
I get knocked off by women. Women are very confusing.
One of your favorite ways to get knocked off?
yeah, I totally get knocked off. I get knocked off by other people. I get knocked off by myself. These days, I get most knocked off by when I'm kind of like repeating old patterns, or without having awareness about them, and then having awareness about them later, and be like, did I really just do that again? Or the opposite of that, of where like I now have enough kind of knowledge, and I'm a little bit older, and I've gone through some experiences, and then I don't trust my gut, and I kind of question my gut of like, am I repeating a pattern and I shouldn't trust my gut, or should I really trust my gut? And then how do I validate that confusion? And then I ask my friends or run it by somebody else. But again, yeah, I confuse myself all the time because life's still up and down, and you can try to make good decisions, but then there's other people involved, and then you can't guess what they're going to do. And so everything's confusing, but I can only do the best that I can do, right? Keep trying, but yeah, people, dynamics, myself, I still get thrown off, but it's fun. Like you said, like if nothing's happening, like it's boring.
You're dead.
Right? So it's fun to learn and grow from the things that I have to go through.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you. All right. Here's one. So you look out. And I think we know Carter's answer. He's already made it clear. He's only got one answer tonight. We'll see what.
Take one answer for that.
Welcome to virtual Carter, who will be joining us at every panel from now on. When you look out at men in 2018, like you know today or yesterday, whatever, and you like, what's your most common thought? Like, if you were to think like, you know, if you had a magic wand, it's like, okay, you guys just need blah blah blah, and it's never going to be that simple, right? But it's like, what's a quality that you guys see is underdeveloped or could use just like what's most needed that guys can offer that is underdeveloped at this point. And let's actually we'll start at that end this time.
That guys can offer, or that guys need?
Well, maybe it's a little bit of both, right? Like I find here that it's like, you know, so guys come to OneTaste and typically they're kind of like, you know, they know that they want something, and usually they think they want sex. That's usually the thing that guys kind of think they want, which is interesting because they go out in the world and they have all the sex that they want and they're still hungry afterwards, like Chinese food, right? And then like, if you're like my experience, I started oming and like, because I was totally trying to get laid. You know, I was trying to get laid without vomiting. That was my goal, right? Please. And without vomiting is a good goal, right? It's a specific, timely, you know. I was trying to get laid without vomiting and without needing to spend like 2 months to feel like really safe with somebody. Someone in here, some person inside of me did not feel safe very easily. And what happened was, I started the practice and I really liked it. I started to find this sort of goallessness and this sort of energy that I was getting from it was really uncommon. And women seemed to be really into it. So I was like, wow, this is cool. There's no more convincing. It's almost like this whole thing has switched. They're asking me if I want to do it. Like, cool, you know. And this weird thing happened about a month or two into doing it. I lost my sex drive. And I was like, this is not good. Like, abort. Like, what have you done to me? You know, well, like Captain Kirk kind of moment. And I went and saw Mayday, yeah, get me out of here. Or just like, I just was confused. And they had told me from the very beginning, they were like, listen, some stuff is going to happen with women that's going to be very different than what you're used to. And I was like, yeah, okay, whatever, you know. And then it happened. And I see Adam having a good time with this one. And I was like, okay, dude, like, give me some sanity. Like, what is going on here? And he was like, well, you know, you've probably just been relating to like what you could get from women, you know, for a long time, and like either your fantasies or just like a certain, what we called like an acquisition-based mind. And I was like, okay, that's true. Like, if I'm honest, like, that's true. I walk down the street and I say, oh, that's a nice Ferrari, the same way I say that woman's had a nice ass. Like, I think of those things almost in the same way. That's, you know, that was honest. And what ended up happening, what he explained was that basically there was something, like, it wasn't that I was meant to go out and like get something from women, but there was actually parts of me that I was meant to open so women could make it into me in a certain way. And I was like, that is interesting. I never experienced that before. And over time, my sex drive came back, but it became something which wasn't sort of like independent of what was happening with women that I was like trying to get a need met. It was like, wow, I can actually feel in real time what's happening between me and a woman. And it's not like something I'm trying to get anymore, but there's something for me to offer here that's part of a dance, that's actually part of a rhythm or something. And it was like, that was totally interesting. I eventually found, to bring it back to the point, I eventually found that I had so much backed up love inside. I had so much backed up attention that it was almost like being in a country where there's like no urinals. Everyone's sort of like hopping around, you know, and it's like it all comes out in these weird ways. You know, like I think you know, love comes out of guys in weird ways. We like, you know, see a woman we like, and one of the most common things I hear from men is like I don't know whether like I want to like fuck it or kill her. You know, it's like one of the two. Like either I think every guy's had an experience probably with women who you really liked who didn't like you back, and then all of a sudden you were just like, "Arr!" And like, you know, had some negative feelings. Because it's got to come out in some way. And for me, it was like, wow, I didn't actually realize that I didn't need love. I needed to give a whole lot of love out. And so, you know, answer however you guys feel, but like, what's the thing that you guys see like, wow, guys have this one backwards?
Yeah, and I think you talked a lot about that. Like, I think there is the swing of like a redefinition of masculinity. Like going from like the John Wayne idea of like the macho man kind of, and the idea of stoicism being like you're flat and you're emotionless, to how can you have emotion and still be masculine without swinging too far of being the feminine, because then you also don't have the polarity of being still this masculine person. And that kind of idea and like what that looks like and who that person is. I think there's, I don't know, I think like as a culture, you know, I grew up, you know, in the 80s and 90s with the whole self-esteem movement, and everything's okay and everything's good, and it was almost felt like still like 1950s housewife of thinking the idea of like everything's fine as long as you don't look at it and you don't look at anything too closely, like everything's good, right?
Stay a mile above it.
And you know this false mask of like everything's fine, and or you're going to be oversensitive to compensate for the way that masculinity is been. And I'm going to be super emotional, and I'm going to take on feminine traits. And I think, for me, that's being redefined as well. Like, I kind of had an awakening like 6 years ago of where I kind of felt years of emotion all at once, and the overwhelm that was like, and then having to deal with, like, how do you have emotions on a regular day-to-day basis and operate in a world, right? And so I think it's that, and having like tools to deal with like how to be emotional intelligence, how to communicate with somebody. You don't learn, like in school you learn math, you don't learn how to deal with emotions, you don't learn how to have good communication. So just, I think the tools of what it is to be a man, how to be masculine, and how to have good communication communication, how to have emotions, and then it's okay to be emotional.
Thank you.
Yeah, for me, it's a little bit repetitive with my first question answer, but I think when you get your hormone
Vitamins.
balance, like, for me, reestablishing a healthy hormone balance, because your hormones have such an impact on how you think and how you act and how you relate to the world and the perspective that you come at things from. And if those are messed up, it kind of skews everything else really weird, and it's hard to find your balance when your basic structure is off balance.
Thank you. I like it, man. I mean, the reason you're like, that's repetitive is because you sold everybody. That's why you're like, oh, why am I still here?
I would say, looking for sort of a word, I would say it's to be more vulnerable, to allow yourself to be vulnerable. The dictionary definition of vulnerable is like open to wounding, like, which I think is not really what I think of being vulnerable. Like, being vulnerable to me is being open to something different. And there's a lot that can happen positive that when you're vulnerable, but a lot of men don't like to be vulnerable.
Thank you. All right, last question. We're gonna go to the audience here, see if anybody has anything. If you're watching at home and you have a question, Aaron will look at the live stream, and if there's any questions for these guys, you can put it on there. But the last question is, what's an experience that you've had that you wouldn't normally talk about that you learned the most from?
Me?
Anybody. You can tell the truth, you can lie, or choose not to answer.
I'll start out on that one. So for me, back in 2011, I was living in Australia, and I experienced an Aboriginal-derived healing modality called holographic kinetics, which is, and there's different cultures have different ways of approaching this, but it's a way of addressing and working on healing early life traumas from this life, in some cases from past lives and things like that. And that really opened my eyes to the hardcore impact that basically between like age 0 and age 7 experiences can have you lay down like this really messed up programming that you just keep running on every day for the rest of your life, and you don't really question it because it's so deep down in your software. And like I even had a magical, amazing childhood. Like I didn't have really any big issues, but everybody has little stuff that you don't even think you have until you really kind of go back and uncover things, and you realize how it's doing these weird things to you on a daily basis that you're not aware of, but it's kind of messing up your life. And it's like you're just running faulty programming that was implemented at a very early age because you felt you needed it to survive at the time. And I've pursued that more also with neurofeedback as well, a kind of more tech approach to doing similar stuff, and that's also been really impactful.
Awesome, thank you.
I'll comment on the, just bring it back to the OneTaste family. I was able to be a speaker at a men's intensive recently, and the power of there's a group of 20-ish men, of which I happen to know many were incredibly successful, wealthy, powerful in their own right, in our sort of traditional right, but in a collective group, all very open and vulnerable, made sort of like almost prostrating themselves to the program to learn to become better. And that, that willingness and the energy that created, I thought was really, really powerful, really inspiring to see like what happens when, and Alex brought this up in the beginning, as men, there's no men's studies course. Because it's like, fucking men are men, you know what you do, right? And so when you get a group of men together that are willing to be vulnerable and emotional and decide to try to be better men, I thought that was a pretty powerful experience.
Thank you.
I don't know, I'm kind of blanking on this.
This is a tough one.
It's a tough one, yeah. Something I don't usually talk
Talked about living in your van.
Yeah, I live in my van.
Oh, we didn't know it was a van.
I had a van, I had a minivan, I had a pop camper, I had a pickup. It was 10 years. But, yeah, I don't know. Something I don't usually talk about.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's talk about everything.
What about that experience 6 years ago where you felt all the emotion at once? once.
Yeah. So all the emotion at once, like, and, kind of like the breaking open. So what does the breaking open look like? And what does the breaking open give you? And like with anything, like hitting, like Tony Robbins calls it, like your emotional threshold, right? Like what happens, and you don't want to be to the point of you're not hitting any of those, because then you're just doomed to mediocrity, because you're not being pushed in a way that actually you're going to get somewhere. Like you're going to be able to be motivated to actually change your life. And so, like feeling emotions. So so you were talking about this too, like the programming and feeling emotions, and then also being able to feel emotions, and then starting to have some sort of intelligence around emotions, of being okay with emotions, and then getting into meditation, like labeling things as emotion, and am I really feeling this, or what's the emotion coming from? Is this really the situation right now, or is this a response to a pattern that I've experienced in the past, and it's coming right now, and it's being projected onto this person or this experience, and then being okay with all of that, like being okay with having emotions, and then trying to think about, how does this, like what goes on here is like the like not having an agenda or expectation within that, and instead of having an intention, and not being let down by my expectations rather than setting an intention, and then kind of watching it go by like a thought in meditation, like you think about a fire truck, you're like, oh, the fire truck, there it goes. But then also realizing like what to do with emotions, and then are emotions real, are thoughts real, and then how do I want to attach to those? And so that's a lot of growth, and so that's a lot of pain, and that's a lot of waking up, and so a lot of things had to happen at once for me to be willing to do those things, and being willing to grow, which was then all these gifts come out of being willing to grow and being awakened in some way. And it's great. But now the thing is that when there's not the growth, like I'm in a Kundalini teacher training right now, and within like the first couple of weeks, like I used to get like really high and spaced out, right? And now, like a couple weeks in, I kind of like boom, came back to earth, and I was like, oh, it's still like chasing a dragon, right? You're looking for that experience, and even when that experience doesn't happen, and you're just having normal life. Like normal life is great too, right? Like I love just like going through life and having friends and having connections, and so I don't know, that's great.
The way you say it like that about with your Kundalini experience, like because I come across that a lot with different things as well, as when you're driving, you feel acceleration, you don't feel speed.
Yeah.
So like you can be going 80 on the freeway and it feels like nothing, right? Yeah. But if you're in that Ferrari you were checking out and you hit it towards 0 to 60, you're feeling that.
Yeah.
And so with practices like Kundalini, or with other kinds of practices, or working on your health, and maybe you start taking some new herb that makes you feel amazing, you feel the acceleration, and then you get up to whatever speed that thing is going to take you to, and you don't really feel it anymore. But it doesn't mean it's not working.
Right.
It doesn't mean it's not great for you. You're staying at that speed, which is awesome. But you're not always going to have the acceleration. That comes here and there, and it's beautiful when it happens. But you got to realize you're not always going to have that.
Thank you. All right, we can take a couple questions from our studio audience. See if we have anyone back there. See, you, sir. Yes.
I'm going to dovetail off the acceleration question. For lots of years of my life, I've been quite happy being in my own cave, doing my own projects, sort of being the one that makes the decisions, being in charge. And now I'm interested in not being alone in working with projects, which means that I want to be engaged with someone else, which means not being in charge or not knowing what's going to happen. And so the question is, if there's a personal experience that you have about how you manage not being the one that decides everything but is part of the equation, how do you deal with the discomfort of it? How do you go into it? How do you go into it at all? Is it something you're interested in? And how do you make it safe if that's appropriate to part of the question?
I mean, I think about this a lot more in a business and project sense, and I think it's relatable in that this is the serenity prayer, right? You know, like there are things you can control, things you can't. Know the difference, right? And when you start to do things with more than one person, right? Almost by definition, or should be by definition, like 1 + 1 should be equaling 3, right? Otherwise, there's not a lot of point. But you got to realize that the trade-off for that extra value is a degree of control. And in my life, like, you just got to get over the fact that there are certain things you're not going to be able to control. From a practical, like, balance standpoint, like, pick the things that are absolutely critical. The other people you work with understand what's absolutely critical with them. Communicate that, and make sure that you know that's how you're working together. Like there just is no way to avoid a loss of control when you move past a one-man team. You know, it's by definition. But there's a reason why we're not a world of 5 billion individual people, right? We're collectives, towns, families, countries, right? So we're generally better off as a group. But there's that's the hardest thing about training and leading and teams and relationships, and that is it. That you no longer have solo control.
And I think also, and I haven't grown businesses the size of these other two gentlemen, but set up really good filtration systems when you are picking the person. So like whenever we hire somebody for our business, one of the things that they go through before we even talk to them, like we just kind of look at the resume, and then if they're remotely interesting, I have a 10-question logic test that they'll do just for me to figure out like, do they have good like logical thinking skills, and are they of like sound mind? And some people won't answer a single question. They'll write back and say, I don't understand what this has to do with the job. If they say that, they're out. If they some people will try it and get like 1 out of 10 right, and it's a multiple choice test. So by odds, you're going to get 2 or 3 right. So if they're that bad, you're done. Some people will get 10 right. They're a little scary because it's really friggin' hard. So, like, it depends what kind of job they're applying for. If it's a job where you're just like doing packaging and you have like this genius level IQ, it raises other red flags in a different direction. Like 5 to 8 out of 10 is like the sweet spot, and then then we talk and we go from there, and you suss out their emotional intelligence and other aspects. But this is the first step is logic test. And so yeah, filter really good, and be like if once you try to do your filtering and you have to start working together, don't be afraid to pull the plug on that particular person if you're seeing that you made a mistake. Like, don't be so invested in, oh yeah, I am the best filtration guy to pick the right person, that whoever I pick, I'm going to stick with them. Like, once you hit the road together and you're on that road trip of doing whatever it is you're doing, and they're doing annoying stuff in the car, like, it's okay to kick them out. Swing back and find a new road trip.
I don't think there is a thing as control. I think everything's out of control. So the idea of trying to have control is kind of like a futile thing. Of like, and it's also limiting. Like if you, so I always like to set intentions and goals, and not have expectations of how I'm going to get there. Because if you're looking through a hole this big of what your idea is, and like, I'm going to make $1 million, and I'm only going to make it this way, there could be all these other possibilities. So you limit yourself to a couple possibilities rather than an infinity of possibilities. With these other people's skill sets and life knowledge and things that you might not even see, which would actually, again, be 1 + 1 = 3, where you get these infinite, expectations and knowledge bases, and then the cross-pollination of ideas that actually create a lot of value for everybody. And then, that was great. Like the whole, when I'm hiring people, what I like to do the most is pre-qualify as much as possible. Like if I'm going, it's kind of fashionable in tech to not sign NDAs because I'm too cool to sign an NDA, or NDAs aren't enforceable. But for somebody to say, just to flat out refuse to sign an NDA, that's more of a signal than actually the NDA itself. Like I see that as a person that's kind of untrustworthy, or too arrogant, or won't even consider it or give me a reason why. Because then that's also a signal of communication. And so, so it's more pre-qualifying, because then if you hire somebody and it doesn't work out, then you've lost the time of working with them and training with them, and then you still have to start from where you were when you started with them. Like we had this one guy, and we hired him to do some tech, and we didn't qualify him because we didn't know how to tech. We just kind of hired him, and then we had to pay somebody to fix the stuff that he broke, and then hire somebody else to do the new work that still wasn't done. And so I was spending a lot more time on pre-qualifying before actually starting. Yeah.
I'll take this one too, which is I think you got to look at, and this is sort of, this is our kind of OneTaste philosophy on some level, but it's like, this has been true for me, which is, for me, I got to look at what's my goal, right? Nothing's good, bad, right, or wrong unless it's in relation to a goal. And if my goal is to create the most like productive work environment, solely if that's what it is, then there's probably a whole lot of stuff that I can do, in a hiring process or in like a interview process to make sure that's happening, right? And one of the other things I've learned is that depending on how much skill I have, or depending on how much, like sort of how big a field of attention I have for this experience, I could hire for wake up. So in other words, I could hire someone who I have no idea what it's going to produce.
Like, yeah, and kind of like the breaking open. So what does the breaking open look like, and what does the breaking open give you? And like with anything, like hitting, like Tony Robbins calls it, like your emotional threshold, right? Like what happens, and you don't want to be to the point where you're not hitting any of those, because then you're just doomed to mediocrity, because you're not being pushed in a way that actually you're going to get somewhere. Like you're going to be able to be motivated to actually change your life. And so, like feeling emotions. So yeah, so you were talking about this too, like the programming and feeling emotions, and then also being able to feel emotions, and then starting to have some sort of intelligence around emotions, of being okay with emotions, and then getting into meditation, like labeling things as emotion. And am I really feeling this, or what's the emotion coming from? Is this really the situation right now, or is this a response to a pattern that I've experienced in the past, and it's coming right now, and it's being projected onto this person or this experience? And then being okay with all of that, like being okay with having emotions, and then trying to think about, how does this, like what goes on here is like the like not having an agenda or expectation within that, and instead of having an intention, and not being let down by my expectations rather than setting an intention, and then kind of watching it go by like a thought in meditation, like you think about a fire truck, you're like, oh, the fire truck, there it goes. But then also realizing like what to do with emotions, and then are emotions real, are thoughts real, and then how do I want to attach to those? And so that's a lot of growth, and so that's a lot of pain, and that's a lot of waking up. And so a lot of things had to happen at once for me to be willing to do those things, and being willing to grow, which was then all these gifts come out of being willing to grow and being awakened in some way. Yeah, and it's great. But now the thing is that when there's not the growth, like I'm in a Kundalini teacher training right now, and within like the first couple of weeks, like I used to get like really high and spaced out, right? And now, like a couple weeks in, I kind of like boom, came back to earth, and I was like, oh, it's still like chasing a dragon, right? You're looking for that experience, and even when that experience doesn't happen, and you're just having normal life. Like normal life is great too, right? Like I love just like going through life and having friends and having connections, and so I don't know, that's great.
The way you say it like that about with your Kundalini experience,
Yeah.
like because I come across that a lot with different things as well, as when you're driving, you feel acceleration, you don't feel speed.
Yeah.
So like you can be going 80 on the freeway and it feels like nothing, right?
Yeah.
But if you're in that Ferrari you were checking out and you hit it for 0 to 60, you're feeling that.
Yeah.
And so with practices like Kundalini, or with other kinds of practices, or working on your health, and maybe you start taking some new herb that makes you feel amazing, you feel the acceleration, and then you get up to whatever speed that thing is going to take you to, and you don't really feel it anymore, but it doesn't mean it's not working.
Right.
It doesn't mean it's not great for you.
That speed.
You're staying at that speed, which is awesome, but you're not always going to have the acceleration, that comes here and there, and it's beautiful when it happens, but you got to realize you're not always going to have that.
Thank you. All right, we can take a couple questions from our studio audience, see if we have anyone back there. Let's see, you sir, yes.
I'm going to dovetail off the acceleration question. For lots of years of my life, I've been quite happy being in my own cave, doing my own projects, sort of being the one that makes the decisions, being in charge. And now I'm interested in not being alone in working with projects, which means that I want to be engaged with someone else, which means not being in charge or not knowing what's going to happen. And so the question is, if there's a personal experience that you have about how you manage not being the one that decides everything but is part of the equation. How do you deal with the discomfort of it? How do you go into it? How do you go into it at all? Is it something you're interested in? And how do you make it safe if that's appropriate to part of the question?
I mean, I think about this a lot more in a business and project sense, and I think it's relatable in that this is the serenity prayer, right? Like there are things you can control, things you can't. Know the difference, right? And when you start to do things with more than one person, right? Almost by definition, or should be by definition, like 1 + 1 should be equaling 3, right? Otherwise, there's not a lot of point. But you got to realize that the trade-off for that extra value is a degree of control. And in my life, like, you just got to get over the fact that there are certain things you're not going to be able to control. From a practical, like, balance standpoint, like, pick the things that are absolutely critical. The other people you work with understand what's absolutely critical with them. Communicate that, and make sure that that's how you're working together. Like, there just is no way to avoid a loss of control when you move past a one-man team. It's by definition. But there's a reason why we're not a world of 5 billion individual people, right? We're collectives, towns, families, countries, right? So we're generally better off as a group. But there's that's the hardest thing about training and leading and teams and relationships, and that is it. That you no longer have solo control.
And I think also, and I haven't grown businesses the size of these other two gentlemen, but set up really good filtration systems when you are picking the person. So like whenever we hire somebody for our business, one of the things that they go through before we even talk to them, like we just kind of look at the resume, and then if they're remotely interesting, I have a 10-question logic test that they'll do just for me to figure out, like, do they have good, like, logical thinking skills, and are they of, like, sound mind? And some people won't answer a single question. They'll write back and say, I don't understand what this has to do with the job. If they say that, they're out. If they some people will try it and get like 1 out of 10 right, and it's a multiple choice test. So by odds, you're going to get 2 or 3 right. So if they're that bad, you're done. Some people will get 10 right. They're a little scary because it's really friggin' hard. So, like, it depends what kind of job they're applying for. If it's a job where you're just like doing packaging and you have like this genius level IQ, it raises other red flags in a different direction. Like 5 to 8 out of 10 is like the sweet spot, and then we talk and we go from there, and you suss out their emotional intelligence and other aspects. But this is the first step is logic test. And so yeah, filter really good, and be like if once you try to do your filtering and you have to start working together, don't be afraid to pull the plug on that particular person if you're seeing that you made a mistake. Like, don't be so invested in, oh yeah, I am the best filtration guy to pick the right person, that whoever I pick, I'm going to stick with them. Like, once you hit the road together and you're on that road trip of doing whatever it is you're doing, and they're doing annoying stuff in the car, like, it's okay to swing back and find a new further. But
I don't think there is a thing as control. I think everything's out of control. So the idea of trying to have control is kind of like a futile thing. Of like, and it's also limiting. Like if you, like, so I always like to set intentions and goals, and not have expectations of how I'm going to get there. Because if you're looking through a hole this big of what your idea is, and like, I'm going to make $1 million, and I'm only going to make it this way, there could be all these other possibilities. So you limit yourself to a couple possibilities rather than an infinity of possibilities. With these other people's skill sets and life knowledge and things that you might not even see, which would actually, again, be 1 + 1 = 3, where you get these infinite, expectations and knowledge bases, and then cross-pollination of ideas that actually create a lot of value for everybody. And then, that was great. Like the whole, when I'm hiring people, what I like to do the most is pre-qualify as much as possible. Like if I'm going, it's kind of fashionable in tech to not sign NDAs because I'm too cool to sign an NDA, or NDAs aren't enforceable. But for somebody to say, just to flat out refuse to sign an NDA, that's more of a signal than actually the NDA itself. Like I see that as a person that's kind of untrustworthy, or too arrogant, or won't even consider it or give me a reason why. Because then that's also a signal of communication. And so, so it's more pre-qualified. Because then if you hire somebody and it doesn't work out, then you've lost the time of working with them and training with them, and then you still have to start from where you were when you started with them. Like we had this one guy, and we hired him to do some tech, and we didn't qualify him because we didn't know how to tech. We just kind of hired him, and then we had to pay somebody to fix the stuff that he broke, and then hire somebody else to do the new work that still wasn't done. And so I was spending a lot more time on pre-qualifying before actually starting.
I'll take this one too, which is I think you got to look at, and this is sort of, this is our kind of OneTaste philosophy on some level, but it's like, this has been true for me, which is, for me, I got to look at what's my goal, right? Nothing's good, bad, right, or wrong unless it's in relation to a goal. And if my goal is to create the most productive work environment, solely, if that's what it is, then there's probably a whole lot of stuff that I can do, in a hiring process or in a interview process to make sure that's happening, right? And one of the other things I've learned is that depending on how much skill I have, or depending on how much, how big a field of attention I have for this experience, I could hire for wake up. So in other words, I could hire someone who I have no idea what it's going to